Welcome to Love in Life, a guide to a positive mindset. My aim is to show you that the key to a happier and more positive mind is to love the life you have. We will look at tips and tools you can use to improve your mindset, and the best thing is, we'll all be on this journey together. Welcome back to Love in Life, where last week we had our first guest on the show, which was the lovely Hayley, and oh my God, wasn't it amazing? She was a complete natural, and I've had so many messages to say what a great episode it was, and people have listened back and said what a great team we are. So I'm sure you will see more of Hayley in the future, and potentially, as we said last week, something, we may collaborate in some way in the future. Time will tell. But yeah, I absolutely loved having a guest on the show. So I have got some more people lined up to come on and speak to me. So I'm sure you're looking forward to that. What a crazy week it's been. Kids are back to school. So I've gone back into full on work mum mode. Cramming all my work into the day. I say cramming, you know what I mean. Trying to be highly organised throughout the day. And, doing all the rugby runs. We're back into rugby again now. So we had our first games on Saturday. I do love this time of year and getting back into all the sports. Obviously, we've had the summer break. And I really do just love this time of year. I mean, Alfie had his first match on Saturday, and it was still, we were sat in the field where he's playing rugby, and it was 30 degrees. So it didn't exactly feel like the start of autumn, but, he loved playing. I got to put the shorts on again for a few days. But yeah, bring on autumn, I say. Something I want to talk to you about today is something I've been wanting to talk about for a while now. And it's something that I've mentioned a few times on my Instagram page and in my Facebook group. But, it's something I very, very strongly believe in. And that is the link between the brain and the body and how it causes pain. But I want to just start by saying I am not a medical expert, as you know. I am not an expert in any way, shape or form. So I want to just give a little disclaimer here to say if you have any pains or illnesses that you should see the GP for, then please, please, please do see the GP. GP, family doctor, whatever you call it, where you are. By all means, send me your questions and I will give you my view or opinion. But this is just opinion. It is not medical fact by any means, okay? So now we've cleared up my lack of medical expertise. Now for what I've actually learnt and observed and thoroughly researched. Any discomfort you feel, whether that's emotional, physical, whether it's pain, it's caused by a traumatic event in your past that is unresolved or has been suppressed. And I do hear a lot of people say, well, I haven't really had any trauma. I haven't had a traumatic childhood. I haven't had a traumatic past. But we have all experienced trauma in some way, shape or form. And because trauma shows up in so many different ways, trauma doesn't have to be, the obvious extreme cases of trauma that we naturally think of when you hear the word trauma, like physical abuse, sexual abuse. It doesn't necessarily mean that. There are weaker terms of trauma and there are stronger terms of trauma. And whatever that is to you is relevant to you. And I said this to a client the other day, like she said, oh, but I haven't, I feel really silly saying that it's traumatic because what other people have been through is so much more compared to what I've been through. And I was like, stop. You have experienced trauma and it's all relevant at the end of the day. So what you think is traumatic is going to be completely different to what somebody else thinks is traumatic. It doesn't matter what somebody else classes as traumatic. Okay? So even if we have only experienced very, very weak trauma, this is still trauma in our body. And an example of this, a very simple example, which I guarantee we would have all experienced in our childhood, is to be quiet, or is to hold on, or to stop being silly. Don't cry, don't be a baby. Those sorts of things, they all cause trauma. Being laughed at by friends in school, being told you're stupid by a teacher or a parent or a sibling, it all is trauma. Because trauma is simply something that creates a negative emotional response in us. And quite often, the negative emotional response is suppressed. It's swallowed down. And that trauma becomes trapped in your body. And not only do these suppressed traumatic events show up as limiting beliefs, they also show up as pain. When trauma is trapped in your body, there is extensive research and evidence to show that trauma, that part of your body where the trauma is stored, the cells of your body change. They physically change. They become more vulnerable. I've actually purchased an amazing book recently which talks more about how trauma affects your body. It's called Metaphysical Anatomy, and it's by a lady called Yvette Rose. So I'll put a link to that in the show notes actually, because it is such a good book. It's great for referencing as well. So if you've got like a particular place in your body that you are getting pain, then you can use it as like a reference as well. And there's also the Louise Hay book. If you've ever read the Louise Hay book, then you'll probably be familiar with this. I know the Louise Hay book is a lot more better known, and she's also an amazing law of attraction practitioner. Getting back to trauma. So different types of trauma, different types of negative emotions and negative emotional responses will be stored in the body in different areas depending on what that trauma is. And obviously this tends to be the case, but it's not always absolutely the case. But for example, people who suffer with back problems tend to have some kind of emotional trauma around support, around responsibility. Either they feel unsupported or they feel the pressure of having to support. And that is quite common with people in back problems. And you can go into it further by saying people who suffer with lower back, it tends to be like a financial responsibilities tend to be held in the lower back, and their middle back tends to be responsible for others. So like you're the main carer in the family, then you might find that you suffer with mid-back problems. But I don't want to talk too much about where specific traumas are held in different parts of the body, because I don't want to focus too much on this, because we quite often have the answers ourselves. So if, for example, you suffer with migraines, what triggers your migraine? If you know what triggers your migraine, then that will be somehow linked to a traumatic event or an emotional response that you've had in the past. So if this, obviously migraine sufferers tend to suffer with migraines over and over again. But if you notice that your migraines come on in quite quick succession for a period of time, and then maybe they ease off for a little while, and then maybe they pick back up again, what you need to do is question, obviously, what is the trigger of it, but what were you actually doing around the time that they started coming on again? And then look back to the time when they would have been started to come on before. What were you going on? What was going on in your life for you then? How are the two linked? And that will help you narrow down your trigger. So, for example, with migraines, is it stress that's triggering your migraine? And if so, what kind of stress is it? What situations are you in when this stress is triggered? You might find, as an example, that you feel under a lot of pressure at work. You might feel the need to take on more responsibilities at work. Is this because you don't want to say no? In which case, your trigger might be whenever you feel the needs to take on extra responsibility, when you're asked to take on responsibility and you don't feel like you can say no, then maybe something has happened in your past where you haven't been able to say no, or you've been brought up people pleasing and feeling like you have to agree to things all the time. That is just an example. But yeah, make sure you think about what conflicts are going on at the time. What conflicts are going on in your head at the time? So if you can't think back to patterns of, what was going on before the period of time when you started suffering from this, then just notice what is going on when it starts again. Like, really be mindful of what is going on in your life in general when your migraine starts back up again. And I'm going to give you an example of something that I had reoccurring to me, which you might have heard me talk about on my social media because I did do a post on this recently. But when I used to do wedding cakes, and I didn't necessarily realise at the time that this was linked to wedding cakes, but I used to wake up every Saturday morning without fail with this. It started off as a tension headache, but it was like this deep, heavy feeling in my shoulders, neck, and lower head. And it would gradually, throughout the day, make its way up over my head, onto my forehead, and into my eyes. And as soon as I feel it hit my eyes, like, that's when I know that's it for the day, really. I'm there for the day. And I used to wake up with this headache every Saturday morning. And Saturday mornings is when I obviously used to have to go and deliver and set up wedding cakes. And I noticed, I can't remember when this started, but I definitely recognised probably around about the time that I started questioning if I wanted to carry on doing wedding cakes anymore. I definitely started to recognise that this was happening every single week. Whether I had a cake or not, it was like my head knew Friday night to just be tense, ready for Saturday morning. So as I would wake up feeling like this. And then it went. Thinking back, it stopped doing this at Christmas. And I did my last official wedding cake in December last year. So that was that. I didn't really give any more thought to it until recently. I did another wedding cake. It was for a friend who I'd already agreed to do a wedding cake for her. And lo and behold, about 2 days before I delivered the wedding cake, I had this feeling again in my head. Started off in my shoulders and my neck and made its way up into my head. And it's so strange because You just get on with it, don't you? You can't let it stop you doing your job a lot of the time. Some people obviously do have it so severely that they can't carry on doing their job. But for me, there's no way I could let a bride down on their wedding day with their wedding cake. So I obviously delivered the wedding cake, and then as I was driving home, I was thinking, I'm going to go and have a sleep because this is it now. It's moved to my eyes. This is it. I'm done for the day now, and I obviously just need to rest. But it was so strange. By the time I'd driven home, and it was about 45 minutes driveway, so by the time I'd got home, I walked through the door and I realised my headache had completely gone. And I think just knowing that is, I've got no more wedding cakes booked in at all. But knowing that I was done with that, it just went as soon as I walked through the door, which I just straight away, it just made me think, my suspicions at the time were right. It was linked to delivering wedding cakes, and that just proved it for me. So whilst that isn't necessarily trauma as such, that is an indication of some kind of discomfort in my life. You might like to think of it as a misalignment in life. I'm not aligned to doing that anymore. So there are a couple of journal prompts that you can use to try and help you identify what area of your life is triggering this pain or problem. So what I want you to do if you have a pain or a reoccurring health issue that keeps coming back or just comes up every now and again, what I want you to do is just ask. I want you to write down, don't just ask yourself, because I think journaling this out really does make you use your head and your heart. It makes you dig deep. So what was going on in my life when this problem originally started? So going back to migraines, when you try and think back to when you first had your first ever migraine, what was going on in your life? And then go to when this problem started resurfacing, or the last time you had a migraine. Again, ask yourself, what was going on in your life when this problem resurfaced or this pain resurfaced? And then when you've got those two things, ask yourself, is there a connection? How was I feeling emotionally? And why was I feeling like this? A couple of months ago, July, I think it was, all through July, I had a sty, like an inflammation on my right eye. And I had it for about 3-4 weeks. And then when it eventually cleared up, I didn't take anything for it because obviously, I do believe that it is linked to something emotional that's going on. So obviously my main priority is trying to figure out what it is that's causing it. So anyway, I didn't figure out at the time what was causing it. I had a belief coding session, and the following day, it cleared up. So I thought it must have been just something that I'd managed to heal in that session. Anyway, then when I was on holiday, so like 6 weeks later, the sty came back again. And it was when I was doing a belief coding session on a family member. Like, this family member asked me to do a session on them. And as soon as I agreed to do it, the sty came up again. My eye started itching and I just couldn't leave it alone. So it occurred to me that all throughout July was when I was doing my training for belief coding. And then obviously it was triggered again 6 weeks later when somebody asked me to do a session on them. So I thought to myself, this has got to be something to do with self-doubt, because that is the two things that were going on at the time. So, that was the connection for me, was the self-doubt. Like, am I able to do what I do correctly and, do what I do to my best ability and all that? Because I do suffer with self-doubt. and it's something I've worked on for a long time now, as I've been completely open and honest with you. So I did a session on myself on that, and it healed up straight away. So I'm confident that that is what was causing it. So, you know, it does help to just sit down and try and figure out what was going on each of the occasions that it happened. And if you really struggle to do this, then just simply closing your eyes and putting your right hand on your heart and just taking a few deep breaths and just simply ask yourself, why is this pain happening? And I bet you, if you're open and honest with yourself, your body, your brain, your subconscious already has the answer. It's just whether you're open to seeing the answer or not. So just try that as well if you struggle to see the connection between the times that you have this pain. And actually, I've just looked up in the book I was telling you about earlier, the metaphysical anatomy one. And as I said, you can use it as a reference. So I've just looked up inflammation of the eye. They haven't got STI specifically, but inflammation of the eye. One of the possible causes of this that it suggests is fear of seeing how brilliant and amazing you are. And so obviously for somebody who has an underlying self-doubt issue, that's obviously really difficult to do. Yeah, it's quite funny. No, it's not funny. It's really not funny. But yeah, it also says you may have an association with seeing the truth as painful and traumatizing. Very interesting. I love this kind of stuff. Now, I'm obviously well aware that there will be people that disagree with this. And obviously that's absolutely fine because we're all entitled to our own opinions and do our own research. This is the research I've been doing for a long while. And yeah, there are going to be people that say, well, what about illnesses that are caused by viruses and injuries, pain that's caused by injuries and cancer and things like that. And I think the important thing to remember is I'm not saying those things, I'm not saying the trauma causes those things. It's that trauma causes a weakness in the cells in that area of the body. And from my very limited experience so far, just from doing belief coding, I can visibly see that when people release trauma that they've carried around for years, then their back pain gets better, their neck and shoulder pain gets better. That's just to name a couple of examples that I've had so far in my journey. So yeah, that is my take on it. The best thing about this, you know, if you are open to thinking in this way that pain is caused and disease is caused by trauma in the body, then the great thing about this is that pain can be reduced. Those symptoms can be reduced by healing those traumatic events that we're carrying around with us. And how amazing is that? Like, not only are we healing pain, healing symptoms, but we're also healing painful memories as well. And this is why therapy in general is so amazing. Like, not just belief coding, there are other therapies and healing modalities out there. And that is why it's so good that we take part in this emotional healing. Like, we're in a wonderful place at the moment, in my opinion, where therapy and healing has never been so accessible. And you know what? If you think about it, like we all know somebody or know of somebody who's had an illness of some sort, a stroke or a heart attack or cancer, where we find out their devastating news and then we think it's just not fair because, they've never smoked, they've always been healthy and they've always exercised. And it's all those things that you hear that if you do all those things, like not smoke, eat healthily, do lots of exercise, then we have a lower risk of those illnesses. Like obviously eating healthy, doing exercise, not smoking, not drinking, obviously you're going to be more healthier. But should there be more emphasis on our mental health and our emotional health alongside good lifestyle habits, I think it is time to start questioning if stress, emotional trauma, if these things do put us at more risk of getting ill and being in pain. What do you think? Let me know. Anyway, I find it all mind-blowing. I'm very, very interested. And obviously, this is just the tip of the iceberg. What I've discussed today is literally just scratching the surface. So if you've got any questions for me, if you want to question me, please do send me a DM on Instagram or on email. I'm Lisa at lisadavage.co.uk. Just to end this discussion by just reminding you of what I said at the beginning, none of what I've said is to replace what your doctor tells you, what your doctor has prescribed you. If you have any issues, if this has brought anything up for you that you do want to discuss with your doctor, then do, but make sure you do. Don't take what I've said, which is my own opinion, for gospel. Always work with your doctor. So just to end today, I wanted to let you know that I spent all of last week, not all of last week, because that would be a bit silly, but a lot of last week updating my website. So that is done now. That went live last week. So if you're interested in, please take a nosy. If you're interested in seeing any more of what I do, what I offer, how you can work with me if you want to. My website is lisadavage.co.uk. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do share it with anyone who you think would like to listen to it. Please do feel free to rate or subscribe or leave me a review. Or like I said a million times earlier on, please do, if you've got any questions, send me a message, send me a feedback. I do genuinely love hearing people's feedback. Anyway, that's it from me. Have an amazing week, guys, and I will speak to you next Wednesday. Bye.